Okay, so now we're going to take our little detour through how do we get it and what does it look like and where do we get it and so forth. The most common form is, the most common brand is, we call it the blue tube. Nobody can pronounce the brand name, Boiron, so everybody calls it the blue tube. Pretty much all health food stores have it, and nowadays, at least in Cambridge, Mass, which is home of a lot of holistic practitioners and very holistically enlightened parents, a lot of drugstores have it now, and easily you can get it online. There are 80 pellets in a tube. They say to take 5. You really don't need 5. Just take 2 and roll them around in your mouth. Make sure they touch the mucous membranes inside your mouth a lot, and then you just need a couple of pellets. And so there's only 20 cents in a dose, 20 cents per dose. So I'm going to mention the tubes come with an expiration date. The expiration date is a requirement by the FDA, but it doesn't mean that these have actually expired. They're going to be good pretty much indefinitely unless you expose them to just a couple of things. One is very high heat. Heat over maybe 110, 120 degrees could degrade the pellets. Also, we think that they may lose potency in the presence of strong scents or essential oils. So, for example, I know you would never do this, but I'm just saying, you would not want to leave your homeopathic remedy tube open while, say, you're putting on Bengay or something with a very strong essential oil. So other than that, I mean, these are so unlikely to happen. These things should be good pretty much indefinitely. Another thing I want to mention is that the FDA requires that each tube have a use. But the thing is, each remedy is used for many, many different things. So it might be that the remedy that you want for, say, a sore throat happens to also be good for hot flashes. Well, don't be put off by that. Don't be confused by that. You know, if you've seen in this presentation or you've seen in a book that this remedy for sore throats matches your sore throat really well, don't worry about the fact that the tube says it's for hot flashes, which it might also be very good for. This is the other most common brand, not as well known, but a large store like here, our biggest Whole Foods have a complete set of both brands. This one, it has the red cap. It's like a little squarish white plastic bottle. It has many more tablets, and so it's much less expensive. I happen to like it because it's in little tiny tablets rather than hard pills. It dissolves really easily. And sometimes you want to put the pellets in water and dissolve them, and this dissolves really well. So I have a slight preference for this brand. Honestly, there's not a lot of difference. So if your local store has the blue tube, I would go ahead and get that. Okay, I'm just going to mention, once you get into homeopathy, if you like the idea of it and you find yourself, you have to keep going out and getting more tubes. And also, you might want to have a remedy kit on hand, not just because it's incredibly economical, but also because, let's say your kid gets sick in the middle of the night and you can't get to Whole Foods, or you can't order online. Even homeopathy overnight, I'll mention this, homeopathy overnight is a very good source of supply if you need something delivered the next day. But if you have a kit, it's right there in the middle of the night. And this is the one that's about 2 inches by 4 inches and maybe just an inch deep. I mean, it almost fits into the palm of your hand. Very easily, you can tuck it into a suitcase or a gym bag or whatever. And I gave you the website, Natural Health Supply. And I'm just reminding you, I don't make any money from this. I'm just telling you what to get.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I think professional homeopaths tend to keep kits like this because they're so practical and easy to carry around with us. Okay, so here's how to give them. In a health food store, you'll generally find the potency called 30C. Some people think this means 30 cc, like it's the quantity, like with a drug. You might get 30 cc's of something. It actually means something quite different. It's the strength. 30 is the strength, and it's kind of a moderate to medium strength that works well for most people for things that you would treat at home. And in general, we're going to be talking about treating things at home that come up pretty suddenly. They're only going to last a few days for a few weeks. They'll go away anyway. We call them self-limiting conditions, the type of thing you would usually go to a health food store or drugstore for. We're not talking about treating chronic conditions like arthritis or diabetes or something like that. So for these acute conditions, 30C is great. It will work for most people. One dose is just 2 pellets. You dissolve it in the mouth. It doesn't have to be under the tongue. Under the tongue is a great place to put it because it will stay in contact with the mucous membranes there. But you can also just roll it around in your tongue and just touch the inside of the cheeks. Then, depending on how severe the symptoms are, when you're really, really sick or your child is really, really sick, strong symptoms, high fever, whatever, 4 times a day. Then as it starts to work, or if the symptoms are pretty mild from the beginning, just a couple of times a day is fine. But when the symptoms call for it, let's say it's a very high fever you're trying to bring down, or you're totally flattened by the flu, you can take it hourly, or even in a real emergency, you can take it every 5 to 10 minutes. The most important thing is that as soon as it starts to work, it's like you've got the ball rolling, you leave it alone, you let it work, you don't take it again until the symptoms come back, or it's been a while and it's really stalled. You're like partway there and you're not really there and it's not really making any more progress. Then you could take another dose. A little bit more. Here's what I just said. You take enough to get the ball rolling. You want to see a shift in the symptoms. Here's another great analogy. Let's say you want to ride a bike. What you really want to do is to be able to coast with the bike. You pedal a bit in the beginning, then you can coast. Then the bike starts to slow down. You have to pedal or else you're going to fall off the bike. And then at that point, you just need to pedal a little bit. You have to pedal more in the beginning to get the bike going. That's like taking more doses of the remedy to get the healing process going. Once it's underway, if there's a point when the symptoms start to come back, it'll probably just take one more dose at that point to get the ball rolling again or get the bike coasting again. Okay. I'm just going to mention that I said that 30C is good for most people in most conditions. For some people, it's too strong. That's rarely true for kids. You know, with regular drugs, you're probably accustomed to thinking about what's a good dose for a child. And what you do with regular drugs, and also with herbs and so forth, you think about the standard dose is for an adult, it's for a 150-pound adult. And if your child weighs 50 pounds, you might be thinking about taking 1/3 of that amount. Homeopathy, we think about it very differently. We think about, I told you that it's giving information to the body's vital force, which is what we call the healing energy. And the vital force has to respond. Somebody with a very strong vital force can actually use more of the remedy. And kids, you know, when you see a 2-year-old running around, that kid has much more energy than you do, right?
Right.
So with a child, if anything, they might need more than an adult. You definitely would not reduce the dosage for an adult. I'll make an exception for just a small infant. You'd give the absolutely minimal amount, just 1 pellet. Perhaps with an infant, you probably wouldn't even want to put a pellet in the child's mouth. You would be dissolving the pellet in a little water, perhaps dabbing it on the lips, or just putting a tiny amount inside the mouth, and then waiting to see if the child gets better. If a child or a baby, if people fall asleep when you give a dose, that is such a good sign. You might worry. You might think, what did I do to my child? Did I just poison my child? No. It means that the healing energy, it got this great information. It says, wow, I want to really pay attention to this. I really want to process this. I want to work with this. And the person doesn't have any energy to deal with the outside world. So they have to kind of pull the shade, so to speak, or shutter the door and say, I'm closed for business right now. I have to pay attention to my healing instructions. And so they're going to heal while they sleep. And they'll probably be noticeably better when they wake up. So anyway, aside from infants that you want to be careful with and use a really minimal dose with, kids in general, 30C will be fine. You don't have to worry about this idea you may have heard of, that with homeopathy you have to get worse before you get better. A lot of people have heard this idea. In my practice, it's absolutely not true. And it's definitely not true for acute things that you'll be treating at home. And that's because the energy of the remedy is going to be used up right away by the power of the symptoms. The body's going to take that message and it's going to go to work working on that fever, the cold, the flu, whatever. I can only think of one example in many, many years of treating kids that a child was so sensitive that the first dose was actually enough. And the mother did induce what we call an aggravation. And that's when the remedy is too strong. A mom brought her child in for asthma. And I figured out a remedy for him. But also, at the moment he came in, he had a cough. And so I also gave a remedy for the cough. And I gave my standard instructions. Keep giving it until he's noticeably better. Well, she gave him 1 dose and he fell asleep, and she kept waking him up, which is what you would do with antibiotics or with Western medicine. You might wake a child up for a dose, but not with homeopathy. Healing means sleeping. So she kept waking him up to give him more doses. And then he wasn't getting better because he was like, his body was working on it. It was the same remedy he needed for his asthma. The body was probably happy to get the message. So after a few doses, she said, he's asleep. He's not waking up. And I said, that's perfect. Just don't give him any more. He didn't actually aggravate on it. He just totally conked out with it. But it was unusual for a child to be so sensitive that he would fall asleep and not wake up because the amount of information he was getting from the remedy was a little bit more than he could handle. So 30C from the health food store, that's going to be fine for kids in general and for many adults, but not for hypersensitives. And I always say with hypersensitives, you know who you are. Hypersensitives are the people who will say, if I get a prescription from my doctor, I can only take a quarter of it or I'll get side effects. And I don't even tell my doctor anymore. I just cut it in a quarter, or else I know I'm going to get side effects. I know I'm getting the benefit from the drug. I can feel it working, but I can't handle the full amount. They may be people who react to everything in the health food store. When I had my health food store, certain people would come back, every vitamin, every herb they'd be reacting to. They react to fumes and fragrances. These are the people who can't tolerate perfumes or environmental toxins or dry cleaning fluids or cleaning fluids and things like that. It's not the same as being allergic to one specific thing. It's rather this universal quality. It's as though the person doesn't have good boundaries. And by the way, this is something you could go to a homeopath and they could actually treat you for this, to build better boundaries so that you don't like take stuff on so much. In fact, hypersensitives may be susceptible to other people's emotions, other people's emotional states. If a client says, I can walk into a room and nobody is there, but the last person in the room was mad or sad or something, and I feel it, I start feeling mad or sad because the vibration is in the room, that's a hypersensitive. If you're hypersensitive, you may overreact to homeopathy. You have to be very, very careful. For you, 6C is a good dose. You probably won't find it in a store. You'll probably have to order it online. And don't think that taking one pellet of a 30C means you're taking half a dose. It doesn't work like that, because the pellets are giving information. It's, they're trying to teach your body something. It's like if you wanted to learn a song, you could have 5 people sing it to you all at the same time. It's not that much different from one person. That's why I'm saying don't bother with the 5 pellets. But if you have one person sing it 5 times, you're going to learn the song much better. So if you take 2 pellets of a 30C dose and decide, I'm going to cut it in half and only take 1, you're still getting the message. So that's the hypersensitives, the 6C. The non-reactors, I hate to say it, it's usually the skeptical husbands, because people who don't tend to get sick very much, they have a sturdy constitution, or maybe your teenage football playing son, people have a sturdy constitution, they don't get sick very much, they're not very reactive to things around them, they may not react to a 30C. So you may, if they want to take homeopathy, you may get 200C remedies for them. That's the next potency up. It's not in stores, you might have to get them online. And if you find yourself dealing with emergencies, I mean, honestly, you're going to go to the hospital with an emergency, but I'm thinking about, there are people who want to live off the grid and they're out in the woods somewhere and they're not really near a hospital and they might have an emergency come up. They should have a 200C on hand of the typical emergency remedies. So I'm realizing I just have half an hour, so I'm going to work quickly through this. Okay. To make it stronger, you put 2 pellets in a small amount of water. 4 ounces is perfect. This is a picture of a 4-ounce bottle of water. Dissolve it. Each sip is a dose, and you can succuss it. You give it a whack, and that will make it stronger. So now we're going to get into colds. We already talked about arsenicum for the flu, because remember, homeopathy goes by symptoms. The exact same thing. The person is totally wiped out with exhaustion. The nose is running like a faucet. They got that red mustache of red raw skin under the nose. They may be up and restless after midnight. That's arsenicum. Aconite is a great remedy in general. It could be a cold, it could be a flu, it could be an ear infection for your child, it could be a fever. It typically happens when the child is out running around. It's a little chilly out, they have a heavy parka or something. They're running around, they get sweaty. And then the wind comes up and they get chilled. And they seem fine when they come home, but they wake up in the middle of the night and they have a very high fever and very strong symptoms. Aconite is perfect for that. It only works right in the beginning. When you have this high fever, strong symptoms, this is one you want to have on hand because it's likely to be the middle of the night when you need it. One other reason someone might need it is they get frightened, a sudden fright. Somebody's almost in a car accident. They swerved at the last minute. They almost got killed. Something like that. They got really shocked with fright. They're likely to need aconite.